The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
The week started with an article by CoinDesk about FTX and Alameda's balance sheet. It ended now with FTX filing for bankruptcy. So time to check in with Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day, who's also the editor of CoinDesk State of Crypto newsletter. What a week, Nick.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Very busy couple of days, yes. So, FTX just announced it's filing for bankruptcy. It's Sam Bankman-Fried, the CEO, has resigned. They've got an interim CEO who, as I understand it, actually used to have a role cleaning up Enron back when that happened. So, an experienced individual here.
Well, yeah.
Nick, quickly, why are they filing for bankruptcy in the United States?
I assume it's probably because they do have a fairly large U.S. presence, and U.S. bankruptcy law is in a pretty advanced state. So they're saying they're filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They're looking for certain protections. They're looking for certain processes to unwind or sort out the assets of the company. They do also have U.S. affiliates, but even beyond that, FTX Group itself seems to have had some pretty close U.S. ties. So, they had U.S. investors, they had operators and developers and employees who were based in the U.S. The founder was U.S. national. They possibly had U.S. customers, although I'm not 100% certain on that. So the U.S. makes sense as a jurisdiction to file for bankruptcy. It's certainly going to be probably not an easier process, but a more advanced process than if they were to file in the Bahamas, where FTX is registered. FTX International is registered.
Do we know if this puts potential? I mean, there's potential that Sam Bankman-Fried would face criminal issues. Potentially, if they're found to be any fraud or any suspicion of fraud, does this raise the stakes? And exactly who can file? There's no board of directors. I mean, how did this happen? Do we know?
Well, so we don't have the actual filings yet. Those are supposed to come at some point, I imagine, but federal court database system takes a little bit of time to update. As far as the criminal charges go, whatever investigators are doing, they're going to continue doing regardless of the bankruptcy proceedings. So it's going to be two different things that we're going to see, right? The bankruptcy proceedings, which voluntary, FTX did that. They're filing. We'll look for the court documents. We'll see how that plays out. The investigations, and at this point, we're aware of, for sure, a U.S. Department of Justice investigation, a Securities and Exchange Commission investigation. Several states are investigating. California, for example, announced last night it was investigating the situation. And there's presumably a couple others. Texas was already investigating. I imagine the scope of that investigation will expand. Internationally, I imagine we're going to hear of more investigations in the coming days. We already know, for example, that regulators in the Bahamas and Japan are definitely aware of what's going on, and they've been, ordering FTX to do certain things. So whatever investigations happen are going to happen. They're going to continue. They're not going to stop. The question now really is, what are they going to find? What are they going to see when the bankruptcy filings come out? And, I imagine that's probably going to be the first time we get a really clear look at what's in the books. If they file, for example, their assets, their, balances, the debts that they have. So we'll probably see that pop up in, whatever investigations are occurring.
Nick, quickly, does the fact that they're filing for bankruptcy in the United States, does that increase the risk that they'll be sort of subject to U.S. regulation? Because before they could sort of just be yeah, we're not a U.S. company. Is there any correlation here, or are they separate?
The U.S. risk is going to be high anyway. Like I said, the fact that they do have all these U.S. ties already. So, the SEC, the DOJ, whatever, their jurisdiction extends as far as, U.S. persons are concerned. SBF himself is a U.S. person. Most of his co-founders and executives appear to be U.S. persons. So already they were going to be subject to these, U.S. regulators and their investigations. Beyond that, the fact that there are so many other entities tied to FTX that are based in the U.S. or that are tied to the U.S., including, a lot of the venture capital companies, a lot of these investors, not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them are based in the U.S. So, from a financial regulator standpoint, there's certainly jurisdiction there. A lot of the customers, some of the customers appear to have been based in the U.S., so there's going to be some jurisdiction there. So, by filing for bankruptcy in the U.S., I don't think it's going to increase or decrease the regulatory risk. Really, it's just going to, it's just another thing that's happening. But the U.S. regulators they were already on this, as of this week at least, before, and this isn't going to change that.
Yeah, FTX's John Ray in a Slack message to employees reportedly saying that he will be assisted by Alvarez and Marshall and Sullivan and Cromwell in restructuring the firm. So it's just they are loading up their team there. I guess what
FTT
do you
token,
think is
by the way, FTT token, by the way, trading at 250.
Yeah.
So down a lot from $22 earlier this week.
Yeah. What is the fallout from this, because, I said earlier in the show, FTX was the white knight of the crypto industry, buying up and helping out bankrupt crypto lenders. We see BlockFi now halting withdrawals, and Multicoin Capital, a big investor, also recently releasing a note to investors. And where do you see this headed next in terms of the contagion?
I don't think we can answer that yet. It's one thing that's kind of surprising, maybe, is just how involved FTX and its executives were in, so much, right? So just looking at it from the regulatory angle, for example, we know for sure that Sam Bankman-Fried and his team were lobbying lawmakers and donating to political candidates. We know that he was a massive donor to the current president, Joe Biden, during his campaign in 2020. We know that Political Action Committee tied to Sam Bankman-Fried, the Future Forward Fund, I might be getting the name wrong, but it was being looked at as a possible super PAC for the 2024 election cycle. We know that a bill that he has been lobbying for, which, by the way, the Digital Commodities Consumer Protection Act does predate Sam Bankman-Fried's involvement, as far as I can tell. So we're seeing, we were seeing reports that he had written the bill for the lawmakers, and I'm not sure that's accurate. But that bill, regardless, is going to continue forward. There's probably going to be hearings. Congress is going to be looking into this. We're probably going to see regulators, do investigations. We're going to see possible legislation. We're probably going to see, regulators like the SEC and CFTC perhaps crack down. We know that FTX had an outstanding application for directly settling derivatives within the CFTC. It was a novel thing that TradFi firms said was, a bad idea because it could be bad for, consumer or for investors. And they're going to probably point to this and say, hey, yeah, see, we told you. From, crypto perspective, we're already seeing Bitcoin's price tank, right? I think it was down like $1,000 in a couple of minutes since the bankruptcy was announced. We're going to see it's going to be bad. We're going to see the companies that FTX tried to bail out, for example, Voyager Digital in the bankruptcy process. FTX was supposed to acquire that. That's probably not going to happen now. So you have another class of investors who, they're hoping to get their funds from Voyager back. Not going to happen. BlockFi, same deal. As you mentioned, they halted their withdrawals. So it suggests that they are insolvent, or at least they don't have sufficient, cash to meet all of the demands that people are going to have of them. The investors are
there will
going to
be
be in trouble.
a lot of developing news in the coming days and weeks.